Good day, and welcome to Lesson 13 in our study of the book of Ephesians. We're still in chapter 4 and verses 7 to 14. In the previous part of this chapter, Paul wrote about the mystery of the church and how the Jews and the Gentiles came together as one body, even though they were so different from each other and so hated each other. But this was the mystery of the church, that they two groups came together as one body in the church of Jesus Christ. And he talked about how it was important to have unity in the church. And in the first part of chapter 4, he talked about the unity, that there is one body, one Spirit, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all. This was the unity that he wanted to preach, even though there are differences in backgrounds and differences in opinions, that there's one faith, one God, one bond, one Spirit, one hope. Now he goes on to the next part of chapter 4 with the word but. But. There's always a but in almost everything. But to each one of us, grace was given according to the measure of Christ's gift. In other words, to each person, God gave a gift according to the measure of his grace. This is what he's saying here. But to each of us was given a gift. Grace was given according to the measure of Christ's gift. Therefore, he says, when he ascended on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts to men. This really refers to a passage back in Psalm 68, verse 18. And it refers to David's conquest coming into Jerusalem, where he led a parade of captives. And he also gave gifts to people. He gave gifts to men. And he showed that he had freed the Jerusalem people and led other captives into captivity. So this is what he's saying here, that he, Christ, ascended on high. He led captivity captive. He led the captives that were captives of Satan. He freed them. He led them free and gave gifts to men. Gave gifts to men and gave gifts among men. Now this he ascended, what does it mean but that he also first descended into the lower parts of the earth? He who descended is also the one who ascended far above all the heavens, he that might fill all things. This is an aside. What Paul is really saying here is that Christ was a victor over Satan. And he led all those people who were captives of Satan, he led them free. And he did this by first descending into the ground. Now, whether this means into the ground, into the grave, or whether it means into Hades below the ground, there's a controversy about this. But anyway, the point is he descended into the areas below the ground, the earth. He was put in the earth, so to speak, for 3 days. He descended into hell according to the Apostles' Creed. He talked to the people who were there, and he led them captive as he ascended into heaven. He said he first descended into the lower parts of the earth, and then he who descended also ascended far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things. And in doing this, as the great leaders did when they had a conquest in the past, as David did, as others did when they took conquest over lands, they gave gifts. And so Christ took conquest over Satan, over the regions of Hades, so he gave gifts. And this is what he's saying, to each of us, grace was given according to the measure of Christ's gift. And he said he himself gave some to be apostles, some prophets. Now, the original prophets and the original apostles were only those who were there at the beginning of the church. And in order to be apostles according to the foundation of the church, You had to believe the gospel and plant churches. And the apostles were those who witnessed the resurrection and who could perform signs and wonders. And the prophets were spokesmen and mouthpieces of God. These were the original apostles and prophets. But he gave some to be apostles, some prophets. In our modern day, there are some people who somewhat fulfill these roles, although they're not the same as the original prophets or apostles. He gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists. Evangelists were those who went and spread the knowledge of Christ, the knowledge of the gospel. Some pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints for the work of ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ. Part of the problems with the churches is that all the work is left to a few people. And those few people who are in the so-called leadership of the church are not supposed to do the work. They're not supposed to do all the work. They're supposed to equip the others in the church to do the work of the church and of the gospel. And this is what it says here. He equipped some to be pastors and teachers for the equipping of the saints, of the people in the church, for the work of ministry. We're all ministers. Everybody in the Church of Christ is supposed to be a minister, and therefore a minister of the gospel. And this is what he's saying. He equipped the saints for the work of ministry and for the edifying, for the increasing in knowledge and awareness of the body of Christ, till we all come to the unity of the faith. So this is the gist of God's gifts. This is what God is giving us gifts for. This is what God has given us different talents for, different abilities for, different inferences for, so that we can show the gifts of God's, the best of God's gifts. And one of this is for the unity of the faith. Now, we haven't done a very good job of this, as the world will show. But this is what it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be equipping the saints, the people in the church, for the unity of the faith, and then of the knowledge of the Son of God. So we're to have unity. We're supposed to be unity in the faith. We're supposed to be intimate with the Son of God. We're supposed to know him well. Not just know of him, but know him well. We are supposed to be mature. We're supposed to be mature. We're supposed to be to a perfect man and woman. So we're to be unified in the knowledge of the Son of God, to become a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. We are supposed to be stable in that. We are supposed to know the knowledge of the unity, a relationship with the Son of Man, the Son of God, to become a perfect man, so that we can measure up to the stature of the fullness of Christ, for the reason that we are no longer to be his children, tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the trickery of men, in the cunning craftiness or deceitful plotting. So if we become what God's gifts enable us to become, and we have the leadership of the present day apostles and prophets that are called this, the present day ministers and teachers, so that the saints of the church are equipped. So equipped to understand the unity of the faith, the knowledge of the Son of God, to become perfected as much as possible in mankind and womankind, and then to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. Then we won't be blown around. We won't be mistaken. We won't be deceived by all these different things that are around us, by the people who want to deceive us. It says, we are not tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men and the cunning craftiness of deceitful plotting. This won't happen to us if we know the unity of the faith the fullest knowledge of God, and to become a perfect man as much as possible. We will not have any of this problem because we will have the result of God's gifts. Speaking the truth in love, may we grow up in all things unto him who is the head, Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share, and this causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself. In other words, we are all given gifts. We are all given different gifts for different reasons, for different purposes. But all these gifts together are for the unity of the faith and to build up the saints in the knowledge of God, to become as perfect as possible, and to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, so that we are not going to be pushed about, bandied about, all tossed about by different deceits, different lies, different new doctrines that come about, and by trickery of men. And if we don't do that, then we're able to speak the truth in love and grow up into the maturity in all things in him who is the head. If we all do this, then the whole body of the church is knit together, just as the various parts of a human body work together. We're all knit together to continue and to cause the growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. This is what Paul is saying, that we need to work together again. Even though we are different, we have the unity of the faith to work towards. We have one Lord, one Spirit, one baptism, one hope, one God, one Father of all. And we have to, this is the basis of the unity. And although we all have different gifts, it's important to work those gifts together so that we come to the realization that we're steadfast and solid. We're not going to be tossed about by different doctrines and different theories that come about, but that we can all work together to edify the whole body into what is called the growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. This is the whole purpose of this part of this chapter in Ephesians. So we're going to finish off probably chapter 4 next week, but I hope this helps explain this one little part for you, and I hope that you'll join me next week as we get on to the further part of chapter 4 in Ephesians. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.